Well, I don't want you to be removing any parts of your body. Okay, so I'm going to focus on whoever is not against us is for us. Sometimes in life that's not possible. Sometimes people are just against us and there's nothing we can do about it. But there are too many situations in life where someone might be against us, and there are things that we could do to make it better. When I first arrived here in 2005, I got along really well with the director of the retreat house at the time. But then over a short period of time, suddenly he was pushing me away. Other guys in the community were telling me, he said all sorts of bad things about me. He was sticking knives in my back. He was withholding information from me, and I didn't know what the problem was. Until I did some research and I discovered that he had a pathology that's called fear of abandonment. And that often happens in childhood, where a child is abandoned in some way, either emotionally by their parents, or a parent may even die, or there's a divorce, and the child blames himself or herself for what happened. And then they feel abandoned, and they grow up with this fear that other people are going to abandon them, and they can't face it. So what they do is that they'll get close to someone because they want the friendship, but once it starts to get too close, they're so afraid that that person's going to reject them that instead they reject that person first. Which actually makes no sense because you're guaranteeing abandonment then. But that's just the way it works. And I also knew this because my sister is that way. So I decided, you know what, I didn't like being treated the way he was treating me. But I decided that I had to do something about it. And what I decided to do was to pray to God and ask God to soften his heart toward me, which is a great prayer. When someone is against you, and sometimes you don't understand why, pray for God to soften their heart. And there's a double miracle to that prayer, because he did get better, but God also softened my heart toward him. And I realized that, well, anytime I would see him coming, I would exit stage left, okay? Because I didn't want to have to deal with him. Or if I had to deal with him, I realized that I sent off body language saying, stay away from me, I don't like you. And people pick up on that body language, and that just made everything worse. So I said to myself, I have to stop doing that, because I don't want to make things worse. So things started to get better, then they didn't. Then I had a talk with him, and things were better for about 2 weeks, and then they were bad again. Okay? But at least I understood what was going on. At least I knew it wasn't about me. And, you know, and then I was as nice to him as I could possibly be. Because I wasn't going to throw fuel on the fire, because I don't need to have anybody against me, and I don't want to have anybody against me. And I'm certainly not going to participate in their being against me. Sometimes in situations, though, where it may be people that we care about, it could be family members, it could be good friends, where there's a simple misunderstanding, and we're suddenly against each other, and we don't even talk about it, okay? Like when I was sent to Washington, D.C. in 2019, I got along with all the Redemptorists there. There were 8 from the Baltimore province and me from Denver, and I got along well with all of them, but I really hit it off with one in particular. His name was Peter Lin, but he hadn't been here from Vietnam for very long, and there were things that were funny in America that were not funny, apparently, in Vietnam, okay? And I remember one time, we would have like Cornish hens for dinner, and he loved eating from the carcass. Being a vegetarian, you know, I don't eat meat, but I couldn't, when I did, I couldn't even stand to eat ribs because of the bones. It just grossed me out. So one night, the first night, he's sitting there eating from the carcass, and I'm just making faces because it's like, you know, it's gross to me. Well, the next day, he wouldn't talk to me. And so I knew something was wrong, and this friendship was already important to me. And so I just went to him and said, Peter, what is wrong? And at first he didn't want to tell me, but then he did. I said, Peter, I was just doing that to be funny. I wasn't trying to be offensive. And so we worked everything out. And sometimes there were things he did that were culturally different that I didn't take the right way, and then I would go to him, we would talk about it, and we would work everything out. Oftentimes, though, among friends or families, we don't do that. Instead, we just allow ourselves to be alienated, and we don't even discuss what the problem is and try to resolve the problem. So again, in that type of situation, it makes no sense to have someone be against you when you can rectify the situation in some way. And oftentimes, there really isn't a problem. Once you talk about it, there really isn't a problem. It's like misunderstanding what someone says to you. Someone can say something, you can take it the wrong way, then you're mad at that person, and you could be mad at them for days, and you could be giving them the silent treatment, and all you could have done to solve the whole problem is when they said what they said, you could have said, what did you mean by that? Because it kind of hurt my feelings. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to explain to you that what they meant was not what you thought they meant, and there's no problem. And then you're not against each other. But there's someone in this world that each and every one of us are most likely to be against. And who is that person? Ourselves. I mean, who is meaner to you than you are? Who has to be with you 24 hours a day? Can you escape yourself? No. And oftentimes, no one says anything crueler to us than we say to ourselves. And so why are we against ourselves when we should be for ourselves? Yesterday, I had Mass at Santa Catalina and heard confessions beforehand, and it was really unusual because almost everybody who came in said to me, Father, I've confessed this before, but I feel like I have to confess it again. And so I listen to the story, and then I tell them, you know what, you cannot confess it a second time. The first time it was forgiven. God has tremendous mercy. God has unconditional love for you. God has forgiven you. Do you know what the problem is here? You have not forgiven yourself. You are being your own worst enemy. And that doesn't make any sense. Once God has forgiven you, why is it that we cannot forgive ourselves and let go of whatever we did that was wrong? So your assignment for this week, if you do that to yourself, is to learn to be kinder to yourself, to pray, to believe that God has really forgiven you, because God has really forgiven you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But you need to work on forgiving yourself and letting go of it so that you're not beating yourself up anymore. You are not being an enemy to yourself anymore. You are now on your own side and no longer against yourself. So if you have that problem, do you think that you can work on that this week? That was super poor, people. Yes. Do you think that you can work on that this week?
Yes.
Okay, that was pretty good. I'll accept that. Amen?
Amen.